So what is going on, guys? I'm Black Ops Amazing. Welcome back to another video on the channel where today what I wanted to do is go through everything that I and the community want to see in Treyarch's next game in 2024, which for right now we're just going to call Black Ops Gulf War. We don't know the official name, but we know it's going to be following the Gulf War in the 1990s, so for now let's just call it that. I'm also going to do a separate video on how the storyline will start in that game for the Zombies mode, but for now this is kind of like a message to Treyarch telling them everything I would like to see in the next Zombies game next year. Yes, we're having Zombies this year in Modern Warfare 3, but we know what we're going to be getting in open world / Outbreak DMZ mode. It's not really traditional Call of Duty Zombies. So just putting that aside, talking about proper Zombies, which we're going to be getting in 2024, here is a list of everything that I want to see Treyarch implement into it. And if I could pick a couple of Treyarch Zombies games that I could mash in together to create Black Ops Gulf War, it would be a sprinkle of BO3 Zombies, along with a little bit of BO2 and BO1, and a sprinkle of Cold War. So anyway, getting into it, the first and most important thing that Gulf War Zombies has to have, of course, is round-based zombies. We're not getting round-based zombies this year in Modern Warfare 3, and because of that already people are skeptical. We haven't played it, it may end up being good, but round-based zombies is always going to be the backbone of this mode. I'm 100% sure it's going to return anyway, so there's no need to worry about that. But something I do want to see back in Zombies, which changed during Cold War and Vanguard, is original maps. Zombies has always taken assets from the multiplayer or the campaign, but what was different between Treyarch doing that in games such as Black Ops Cold War compared to BO3, 2, 1 was those reused assets in BO3 and BO2, BO1 Zombies, etc. were a lot less noticeable than what they were in Cold War. You could tell Cold War's maps, besides from D Machine, Firebase C, Toten, and especially Forsaken, were multiplayer maps, whereas if you look at BO3 maps, Horizon Draka, Shadows of Evil, Gorod Kurovi, Zetsubono Shima, Revelations, we go over to Black Ops 2's maps, Buried, Origins, Die Rise, Mob of the Dead, you get the point. All of those maps you would struggle to point out, okay, that's a multiplayer map, I noticed that portion, this part's reused from the campaign. Whereas if you look at Cold War's maps, Forsaken is a campaign mission. Toten takes parts of the Berlin campaign mission. The spawn area for Firebase C is a campaign mission, and it's very noticeable, whereas with all of those older maps that I've just listed from BO3, 2, 1, those maps were specifically 100% made for Zombies, whereas Cold Wars and Vanguards just weren't. They were multiplayer maps or campaign maps slightly changed, whereas what Treyarch used to do was completely design a Zombies map from scratch, unique to this mode. And that was something that I just really missed in Cold War, that feeling of, okay, yeah, this is a Zombies map and it's unique to this mode. It's not shared between, other modes, the campaign, and they actually felt like Zombies maps. And what kind of goes hand in hand with this is if you look at the atmosphere on all of those older maps, Shadows of Evil, Horizon Draka, Gorod, and then you look at the atmosphere on Cold War's maps, it's missing. They just don't feel like Zombies maps. If we take Horizon Draka, for example, the bluish tint to that map, the big castle, the dragons, how much character it had, how much atmosphere, it felt magical. Or again, going back to Cold War's maps, they just didn't have that feeling. They were quite soulless and empty. The main point being, Treyarch have to go back to designing maps completely for Zombies. Yes, you can still take assets from multiplayer campaign, but what they've got to go back to doing is creating maps entirely for Zombies. Otherwise, I don't think you're ever going to completely get that feeling that this is a Zombies map. That's always been one of the best things about Zombies. You can't get Mob of the Dead's atmosphere on multiplayer maps. You can't get Shadows of Evil's atmosphere on campaign missions. The feeling of a Zombies map is just something you can't replicate if you're not building it specifically for Zombies. I mean, it may have just been a time thing in later games. Treyarch just didn't have the time to fully create their own maps like they used to. So hopefully they'll be able to return back to that in their next game, because I think that will fix a lot of stuff. Another thing that Treyarch have to do, I've banged on about this loads of times, is return set casts back to Zombies. Totally ditch the playable operators that we've had in Cold War, Vanguard, and probably in Modern Warfare 3, and return back to set casts of characters. Think of Primus, Richtof and Taki Unikalani Dempsey, or Ultimus. We've had the Shadows of Evil cast, the Mob of the Dead characters, the Call of the Dead cast, the 5 characters with JFK in the crew. How many cool and unique Zombies characters we used to have, and then you compare them to the boring, soulless, lifeless operators that we have now in Zombies that you just don't care about. It's so difficult to have an emotional attachment to operators, whereas everybody cared about the premise characters. The Blood of the Dead ending, how sad that was. I know a lot of people cried because of Richtofen's death. Nothing like that can be replicated with operators because you just don't care about them. You aren't able to build up a connection to them. We do have characters in our current zombie story, such as Richtofen and Samantha, Peck, Grey, Dr. Strauss, etc. And whilst you can connect to them somewhat, they're not playable. So ultimately, you don't really care about them. Nowhere near as much as you would if you have control of that character. So I just hope set cast of characters return in Treyarch's next game. It doesn't have to be Richtofen, Takeo, Nikolai and Dempsey. We saw that Treyarch totally ditched them in BO2 and brought in the transit characters, which people didn't like at first but got to love later on. Just bring in a new set of characters to zombies and make sure we play as them throughout the whole life cycle, so we can get used to them and build up a connection, because having characters was a huge part of the zombie story. That's how the storyline used to be told, and it can't be told that way anymore because we've got operators now. It's just impossible. So we need a set cast. I did just mention Richtofen is still involved in our zombie story. We saw him at the end of Black Ops Cold War. So is Samantha. These are two characters I'd love to play as, Richtofen, Samantha, and then maybe two other newbies joining them. Maybe that won't make sense storyline wise as of yet, but I'd love to play as Richtofen again, and we've never played as Samantha. We'll have to wait and see, but more than anything, we just need a set cast. I also want to see other game modes return to zombies. We used to have ones like Grief and Turned, which were really cool. Okay, they're never going to be as popular as round-based, but Grief and Turned were played. Then we had Rush in Black Ops 4, which kind of went forgotten about. We've also had Outbreak, which is an alternate game mode, but I'd like to see some smaller game modes return. Even if it means just bringing back Grief and Turned, I'd like to see that. But that doesn't mean implementing rubbish ones such as Rush. I mean actual good game modes that people are going to play, not just adding ones in for the sake of it. And talking about Outbreak, I think it's pretty obvious to everyone that it is going to return. Luckily, we have had an iteration of it in Black Ops Cold War, which means Treyarch would have had a load of feedback and they can only improve on it. I wasn't a big fan of Black Ops Cold War's Outbreak, to be honest, but I do think with some improvements it could be good. PvP I think needs to happen. The maps also need to be more stylized towards zombies, not just completely taken from Warzone like Outbreaks were, or in that game it would have been the Fireteam maps. I know that's going to be a lot harder to do because they're bigger, but I think it will help a lot. Besides from that though, they're just going to add in more missions, more objectives, more things to do and just make the world feel less empty. So there are a few improvements they can make to Outbreak. Also, intro and outro cutscenes have to return for every single zombies map. We had an intro cutscene for D Machine, we didn't have an outro cutscene. We then had an outro cutscene for Firebase C, kind of, but we didn't have an intro cutscene. We also didn't get an intro for Mao the Toten or Forsaken. I also think the cutscenes in Cold War, and I'm just mentioning that game because it's the latest one, but if you look at those cutscenes, the quality of them is nowhere near the level of Black Ops 4's cutscenes or BO3's. The level dropped massively. Again, that may have just been a budget restraint or a time restraint, but COD Zombies cutscenes always looked so good. They were some of the best quality ones out there in my opinion. I still love going back to watch them now, and not only do they look good, they tell the story. So we need to have intro cutscenes and outro cutscenes for every map, not just pointless ones that actually give us information and storyline, and also they need to look a lot better than what they did in Cold War. They need to return back to BO3's level and BO4's, like Blood of the Dead's for example. This might be a bit of a controversial one, and I'm not 100% sure if I'd make this change, but the starting weapons. Right now in Cold War, you can pick your own starting weapon. You can have a shotgun, LMG, assault rifle, whatever. And whilst I do like the change, not only do I often question if it's made zombies too easy from the start, being able to have an assault rifle compared to some kind of pistol like the M1911, but also it kind of makes features like the mystery box and wall weapons redundant. If you're able to pick the weapon you want from the start, then there's no reason to spin the mystery box for anything else besides from the wonder weapon. And that also means, well, you're not going to buy wall weapons either. You still can, of course, but in Cold War and Vanguard, I just don't. I have the weapon I want from the start. I'll spin the box to get the ray gun, for example, or the wonder weapon, or I'll just build it. But every other gun in there, to me, is completely pointless, which just, I kind of miss that feeling of spinning the box and then having to get a weapon out of there, even if it's not good, because you've run out of points. It added a different dimension to zombies. On the other side of the argument, I do like being able to pick my own weapon, and of course, it is a choice. You can just pick a pistol if you want from the start, but let's be real, nobody does that. Why would you? You're putting yourself at a disadvantage. So I kind of like being able to pick your weapon, but at the same time, it does remove that difficulty of starting with a pistol and having to spin the mystery box or buy war weapons, which was a key survival element of COD Zombies that it isn't really there anymore. We also need to see more Easter eggs. That one's a given, really. Vanguard had pretty much no Easter eggs. We used to get quite a lot in every Zombies map. That's disappeared over recent years. I'm thinking though again, that's more of a time restraint, and since Treyarch have had 3 to 4 years to work on this next game, we should be getting more Easter eggs in the maps. And the final thing I've written here in regards to the story is, I just want to see less collectibles, less radios for us to pick up around the map, and less ciphers for us to find. The story in Vanguard, and especially Cold War Zombies, was told mainly through radios that you had to find. I think at the end, there are like, isn't there 100 odd radios? I could be wrong, but it feels like it. That was mainly how the storyline was told in Cold War, whereas back in the day, it used to be mainly told, I would say, through cutscenes and quotes. Yes, there were still ciphers and radios, but there was only like 5 radios in each map. They weren't in hard to find places. There was also a few ciphers, but the story was mainly told through cutscenes and quotes. That wasn't possible in Cold War because, like I mentioned, for more than half of the maps we didn't have intro cutscenes. The outro cutscenes that we had weren't very good or informative, and we didn't have important character quotes because we didn't have a set cast. We need a set cast in the next Zombies mode in order to tell the story through conversations and things that they say. Otherwise, Treyarch are going to have to rely on radios again. Character quotes did a lot of that work. So basically, I just want to see less running around and finding obnoxious radios, and more the story being told through just playing the game, through Easter eggs, quotes, and cutscenes. But that doesn't mean get rid of radios and ciphers. We've always had them in Zombies, just maybe tone it down a bit. But I do think with all of those changes, Black Ops, Gulf War Zombies, let's just call it that, has a real chance of succeeding. I think over the past few years, you can't put everything down to Treyarch. They've been dealt some real blows by Activision cutting budgets and not giving them enough time, and also a lot of developers leaving, such as Jason Blundell. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When people leave, their ideas leave with them, and then new ones come in. But more than anything, I'm actually hopeful for not this year's Call of Duty Zombies, next year's, mainly because of the time Treyarch have had to work on it. I think that alone is gonna fix a lot of these issues. But yeah, let me know in the comment section below if there's anything here that you would change. If so, what? Drop a like rating if you've enjoyed the video. Make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest content on the channel. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.